Welcome everyone to the SBA-Sydney Meetup. My name is Kirsten and I'm organizing the SBA-Sydney together with Majek, Dominic, Andrew, Sashan and Nick, who you can also see here today. We are based in Sydney and most of you know us by now. We wanted to grow the local, the national and actually global SynBio community, and we want to foster more knowledge and connections. And yeah, before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of all the land that we're meeting today and pay my respect to the elders, the past and the present. And I'm very excited. Today we're running a panel discussion on innovation, commercialization, and entrepreneurship in SynBio. And we have 4 amazing panelists joining us today. They all come from different backgrounds. They're all at different stages of the entrepreneurship. They either co-founded or running or are chief executives of companies in the space of SynBio, biotech, medtech, agtech, and yeah, I think that's, yeah. So the way how we run this panel today, each of our speakers will give a 3-minute introduction pitch about themselves. And then we talk a little bit more about the topics of the entrepreneur. We'll dive into markets and the customer and how this relates to innovation. And then we talk very broadly about different commercialization pathways, including IP, how to raise capital, the scale up, and exit strategies. This will run about 40 minutes, and then after we will have 20 minutes of Q&A open to the audience. So you can pose all your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of the webinar, and then I pick the question and ask them on your behalf. You can address the whole panel or someone specific. You can vote each other's question to make them more important. And also, I encourage you to include your name when you write the question, because our generous sponsor, Decode Science, will actually select one of the attendees that stimulated the best discussion with the panelists and award her with a $500 gift voucher from Twist for gene synthesis. So we're really grateful for this. Thank you, and Dana will announce the prize at the end of this event. Also, we record our event and publish the discussion later on our YouTube channel, SBA-Sydney. So in case you want to watch it again, or you know someone that missed it, for sure it will be available later. Okay. And yeah, this is it. I'll hand over to our panelists, and the first one up will be Caitlin. Caitlin, it's all yours.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. So my name is Caitlin Cooper, and I am one of the co-founders of SynBiova, which is a small Australian startup, and we're focused on using chicken genome engineering to solve different problems in medicine and in agriculture. So my background is in animal genetics. I did my PhD in animal biology in the US at the University of California, Davis. Then I moved to Australia about 6 years ago, and I did a postdoc at CSIRO in their genome engineering team. And since then, I've been focused on genome engineering in a bunch of non-model species, but a lot of my work has been in the chicken. The 2 big things that we focus on in SynBiova are improving vaccine technology and also improving animal welfare. So in the vaccine space, a lot of people don't know, but actually a lot of vaccines are produced in eggs, such as the flu vaccine. And while a lot of technology has gone into improving processing of eggs and things like that, not a lot of work is actually going on into improving the egg itself for actually growing vaccines. And so at SynBiova, what we've done is do whole genome screening to identify really great gene targets, knocked out those gene targets, and that led to a significant increase in growth of vaccine in those eggs. And so that's our Vaximizer product. The other area that we look at is in animal welfare, specifically in sex sorting in layer chickens. So Only female chickens are needed in the layer industry, not the males. Currently, all of those chicks are hatched and the males are killed. It's a terrible, terrible waste in the industry. And so what we've done is we can precisely place a marker on the sex determining chromosome of the chicken, so the chromosome that tells the chicken whether it's going to be a male or a female. We can put it on the male chromosome, and we can actually visualize the males versus the females right after that egg is laid. So we can pull out those male eggs, and only the females go into the hatcher and they end up hatching. So those are the two things that we're into at SynBiova. So it's really taking our really unique capability in chicken genome engineering and applying it to different problems, really big problems that we're facing right now. Thank you.
Thank you. And next one is Maree.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Maree Smith. I'm an expert in drug discovery translation with specialist expertise in novel pain therapeutics development. I'm inventor of the neuropathic pain technology that was spun out of the University of Queensland into a startup company called SpiNFX Pharmaceuticals in 2005. And so I'm going to tell you a brief story of how this came about. So at the end of 2003, UniQuest, the main commercialisation company of the University of Queensland, held their inaugural Trailblazer Challenge Ideas competition. The aim was to encourage UQ researchers to pitch their research ideas that might have commercial potential. You didn't have to have data, you just had to have an idea. So I pitched my research idea that angiotensin II type 2 receptor antagonists would alleviate neuropathic pain, a type of nerve pain that is notoriously difficult to treat, and so it is a large unmet medical need and would be a large market commercially. My pitch was awarded one of the $8,000 prizes, a very princely sum, which I gave to my chemistry colleague, Professor Craig Williams, in the chemistry school, to synthesize a compound for me called PD123319. Now that compound was known as a tool compound in the cardiovascular literature, but there was no hint that it might have an application in the neuropathic pain world. So it took Craig, I gave him the $8,000. It took him about a year to synthesize a batch of the compound for me. And so once we received it towards the end of 2004, we set about testing it in 2 animals of neuropathic pain in my lab. Knock, knock, knock on my door, and the first eureka moment happened when my lab got positive results showing that this compound alleviated nerve pain, neuropathic pain, in 2 different rat models. I worked closely with UniQuest and patent attorneys to file a provisional patent, and this happened around the beginning of 2005. I then pitched the technology to several Australian venture capital firms to raise investment capital to start a spin-out company to commercialise the technology. I named the company SpiNFX Pharmaceuticals, and it was formed with $3.25 million in investment funds from 3 venture capital firms in the middle of 2005. My lab was awarded funding from SpiNFX for patent enablement that meant generating animal efficacy data on another 6 AT2 receptor blockers within the first 6 months to show that the neuropathic pain efficacy effect was not confined to just one molecule, that it indeed was a class effect. And so that happened. And other preclinical data were generated on these AT2 receptor blockers, and these data were then used to select the drug candidate called EMA 401 for further development. To cut a very long story short, over the next 6 years and with $20 million spent, EMA 401 was progressed through formal preclinical and early phase clinical trials by SpiNFX. In August 2012, my phone rang and the voice at the other end of the phone said 2 words: it worked. And so that was the second eureka moment. The phase 2A clinical trial in 183 patients with postherpetic neuralgia, a type of nerve pain that is notoriously difficult to treat, had worked. And these results were subsequently published in The Lancet in 2014. A second early phase clinical trial was undertaken in patients with cancer chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy, and those data were presented at the World Congress on Neuropathic Pain in May 2015. And 1 month later, Spinifex was acquired by Novartis in the middle of 2015 for US $200 million upfront with considerable milestone payments. And that's my story.
Thank you. You already answered a lot of my questions. Okay, Alison is next.
Hi, I'm Alison Todd. I've had a long history of working in industry. I spent 17 years working at Johnson & Johnson, but when they closed their Australian research operations in the GFC, I co-founded SpeeDx together with Elisa McCarney, and I'm currently the Chief Scientific Officer. I also have an adjunct appointment at the University of New South Wales. I've had it for 25 years and have continuously supervised PhD students during that time. The foundation IP was invented actually while Elisa was doing her PhD under my supervision, and it relates to synthetic enzymes that can detect genetic sequences. Almost everybody thinks of enzymes as being proteins. Our enzymes aren't. They're DNA oligonucleotides. So they are really synthetic biology. So SpeeDx is located at Cicada Innovations, and we now have subsidiaries in the US and USA. We employ a multidisciplinary team of about 90 people worldwide. And within the company, we do everything from invent, define the medical needs and commercial opportunities, with test optimization and validation, clinical studies leading to regulatory approval, test kit manufacture, global marketing, and finally distribution. We out-licensed our tech to oncology to a Belgian company, and they sell companion diagnostics and liquid biopsy tests for tailoring cancer therapy. But the SpeeDx branded portfolio, we specialize in infectious diseases, and particularly applications where very high levels of multiplexing are required to simultaneously detect multiple pathogens. And our other specialty lines are our Resistance Plus tests, which detect both the pathogen, but also markers of antibiotic sensitivity or resistance to, again, aid in diagnosis. We sell globally. We're currently selling into 13 countries, and our customers are predominantly pathology labs and large service providers in the USA. And SpeeDx's vision and goal is to provide diagnostic solutions which empower clinicians to make informed treatment decisions.
Thank you. And then last is Beatrix.
Hello, I'm Beatrix. I'm Chief Commercial Officer at EnginZyme. I'd like to start off saying I'm not a biologist. I'm not even a chemist. I'm a chemical engineer, and I'm not academic. You know, obviously going through my chemical engineering degree, but I stopped at a bachelor's. So I spent 18 years at a large company called UOP, doing everything from R&D engineering into product management, technology management, and then finally licensing and business development before I joined the startup world. I happened to be in San Francisco and joined a startup company called Renovia, who was using chemical catalysis to convert sugar into bio-based chemicals. So that was my first step from oil and gas into bio-based chemicals. And then I moved to Europe and I ended up at EnginZyme. So now moving into the world of biology, the world of enzymes and how to use enzymes to make chemicals. So a very different background to a lot of people in synthetic biology and a lot of people in the startup world. So EnginZyme is all about utilizing enzymes, which are, we all know this, these are enzymes, these are nature's catalysts. We want to utilize them efficiently so that we can really enable sustainable biological production, sustainable chemical production using biology. there's so much R&D happening on biology and enzymes in all these labs, every university, all different startup companies. But we find that so many just stay in the lab, and that's such a shame. And the reason for this, I think, is twofold. One is people don't think about economics early enough. They have a good idea, but do they really understand economics? And they don't understand how to bring it to scale economically. Can this really be a commercial solution? So that's what EnginZyme wants to change. So we utilize enzymes out of the living cell, so not in the living cell as fermentation. So we take away the complexity of having to keep this living cell alive. And we then immobilize either a single enzyme or actually a cascade of enzymes onto our high performance immobilization technology and use this in simple fixed bed reactors. It's really, really straightforward, very simple, but it's effective. The economics that you reach are really impressive, and we can now really start changing the chemical industry, because you know, we all know the demands that are on the chemical industry to significantly increase the amount of chemicals produced to feed the population, to provide medicine, to provide all the luxuries that we want, as well as to reduce our emissions. And the chemical industry needs a new solution, and it will come from biology, but we need to always think about economics. So EnginZyme provides a complete SynBio solution, all the way from enzyme engineering all the way, up to process design and process engineering, focusing on economics at all stages. We work with, or our customers are, I like to call them partners rather than customers. Partners are people who want to bring the new technologies to market, look at sustainable processing. So all of the chemical industry, from cosmetics, personal care, into nutrition, nutraceuticals, into industrial chemicals, plastics, polymers. So we are certainly making the movement to enable more biological processing in industry.
Awesome, thank you very much. Now that brings us to the start of our panel discussion, and I'll open the floor with a very general question. There's a lot of hype around SynBio, developing the new techs for sustainable and economic solutions. How do you see the potential of SynBio, and how do you see the strengths of the entrepreneurship in SynBio? And who'd like to go first? Who'd like to comment? Nobody steps forward?
I can go first. Yeah, I think the potential of SynBio is huge, and I think that fermentation has already shown so many different applications of utilizing biology, very complex reactions, and it's really limited. I love that people are trying to make spider silk and and mimic what nature does. I like people are trying to find new polymers that are going to be stronger, that are not going to break as easily, things like that. But I think that we are tempted to find a biological solution for everything. And we should focus on where it's really needed. If there is a good chemical solution out there, then why replace it? And I have found that there are some people working on trying to identify biological solutions for something that's already very economic. And I think in the future world, we're all going to have to work together, the chemical industry and the sustainable and the synthetic biology. And it's going to be utilizing the technology that works best for each application. So I think sometimes people do get tempted just to run with a solution just for the sake of that they've discovered an enzyme or cell or somehow something of doing it. I think there's great entrepreneurial spirit in SynBio. I think everyone wants to find that solution that they could bring to market, and that's nice to see.
Anyone else? Any comments, opinions?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I haven't been in the SynBio space my entire career, but it's definitely something that we're getting a lot more into. And I think that, SynBio has a really good fit with that entrepreneurial spirit, because it's not necessarily wanting to discover every single facet of an animal or something like that, or a system. It's really problem and solution focused. And so I think that people that really want to, see a problem and find a solution, I think that that's a big part of the entrepreneurial spirit, is being really passionate about that and trying to apply a solution. But certainly what Beatrix said, thinking about a solution when you're sitting in an academic lab is very different than stepping on the other side and thinking about what a solution actually looks like in the real world. And I think that that's definitely something, is sometimes the thing that you think is the problem is not actually what industry's problem is. And so that's definitely something to consider.
Okay. I think that that leads me to my next question. What do you think? Is there an entrepreneur in each of us, or is this something you acquire, you train, you nurture, or how is your experience?
This is Maree here. With regard to entrepreneurship, I think it can be in a nascent form that can really blossom with encouragement. I think it's something that can be squeezed out of a person, so it can also be nurtured as well. So I think it needs to be nurtured in young people in particular.
Okay.
I think the the driving thing with entrepreneurs, that they have an idea or they have a belief in a discovery that they've made, and they're determined to bring that to market. Whether or not you actually start out as a natural entrepreneur or not, because I think I certainly am not. But I mean, the job of an entrepreneur, in my mind anyway, is to assemble a whole team of people required to bring the job through. So you don't actually have to be, don't have to be everything. The inventor doesn't have to be the founder. You just have to have the drive and clever, like-minded people, and assemble them together.
Yeah, I agree. I think you have to think about what is an entrepreneur. And I see that as like a serial problem solver who's driven, self-motivated, relentless and passionate. And those are the things that you need to cultivate or have to be an entrepreneur. But you don't have to invent something to be an entrepreneur. I've definitely never invented something in, from an academic point of view. But you have to be able to move a project forward so that you can get it, get to a yes, get to a positive outcome, and not be daunted by setbacks, and which every project will have those. And I think that's what an entrepreneur is, that spirit, that passion, that being able to always push forward. But a great company, as you mentioned, is made of a mixture of skills. And you can be in a startup and have that entrepreneurial spirit without necessarily being the one that makes the decisions or is leading the company. So you have entrepreneurs at all different levels in the company, but it's always the person who is willing to take that little bit of a risk and step out of the comfort zone and willing to take the path not usually taken. And it's very easy just to go into industry. I did it for 18 years. And then take that other step. And I think that's what makes an entrepreneur. And then finding the right people to support you, I think, is key.
Yeah, I think, lots of different people could be entrepreneurs. And I think, maybe there's this sort of skewed view because you see people up giving pitches and things like that. And, some people might think I could never do that, and so I could never be an entrepreneur. But, it's true that certainly it's often good to have at least one person who can get up and do that. But you also need people that are really detail oriented. You need people that are going to go out and, speak to 15 different insurance agencies to get you business insurance that you didn't even know existed. And so there's a lot of different skill sets that you need. I think, the biggest things are definitely passion and that drive to back yourself and to back your colleagues as well, because it's a step of faith. And so in that sense, maybe not every personality is suited to it, but I certainly think that, everybody's skill set can be used, and everyone can be an entrepreneur, but it's whether you want to do that.
Okay, so what made you do it? What made you jump out of your safe position, or what made you take the risk of, building up a startup? What was your major driver?
For me personally, I've always wanted to do projects that had an impact in the real world, and I've had a really interesting time in academia, and I've always, I could always articulate what I wanted my project to be and how I thought it would impact things, but it's really difficult sometimes, if you're not in the driver's seat to actually make sure that the science that you're doing is actually going to get out there and have a real impact on the world. And so that was really what was driving me, is saying, I could have a really interesting science career not being an entrepreneur, but would anything ever actually impact outside? Maybe not. And I don't know, that just wasn't satisfying enough for me.
Okay.
So I was working.
Alison.
Oh, sorry. My journey started with redundancy. So I didn't so much jump, I was very much pushed. But I believed that the intellectual property that we'd developed would be nothing more than a piece of paper that would be wallowing in the basement of the corporate towers of New Jersey, Johnson & Johnson. And I really wanted it to be used. So that's why we did it.
Okay.
I think it probably often happens when you get that little push on, forced thing. I call it fate, to be honest. That it's making you take a different step. I happen to be in California, in San Francisco, in Silicon Valley, biotech valley, as it's now becoming to be known. And I saw everyone being entrepreneurs around me. I was still working for a big company, and I saw that passion, and it inspired me. It was really exciting. And then I also ended up in a situation where I was looking for a job, and I ended up a startup company, and it was such an eye-opener in a different environment and exciting. Then I ended back in Europe, and I was trying to make the decision between going back into big company, actually back to my old company, a very, a better paid role where I could do it with my eyes shut. It would be very easy, versus going to a startup, EnginZyme. And I was sitting over a glass of wine talking through the different roles, and my husband came up with this analogy of the Mustang and a seaside donkey. And the Mustang is the startup person. It's the one running free, but it has so many risks. You can hurt yourself. The seaside donkey is quite happy going around the pen, knowing what it's doing day in, day out, and it needs that for that, and it's very happy as well. And so, what did you want to be? The Mustang with the higher risk but freedom, or the seaside donkey? And that's how I made my decision. So I was a Mustang.
Okay.
Okay. So in my case, I knew that neuropathic pain was a very large medical need. And so that was why to be able to address that, you had to go down the commercialization track. So there was no choice. So you could either publish the work, and it just, might get cited in citation counts, contribute in that way. But if I wanted to change people's lives for the better, I had to go down the commercialization track. And so that's why I did that.
Okay. Excellent. I'm going to change gears now and go to our next topic, which is more about the market and the customer. And I wanted to know, I think you all actually answered this question already. Was there the customer and the problem first, and then you went to the lab and you developed a solution, or did you just have this amazing idea and then you found there's actually a market for it? Or did you had an amazing idea, there was no market for it, but you thought there has to be a market because it's better, so creating your own market? How did it go in your case? How was that process?
Well, in the pain field, there's a very large unmet medical need. So there's 20% of adults around the world at any one time will have chronic pain. And if they're aged over 65, well, then it's 1 in 3. And so there's the existing medications are not particularly good due to central nervous system side effects, or the fact that they just don't work. So in the nerve pain arena, neuropathic pain, the largest selling product in the market is a multi-billion-dollar product per annum. So from the commercial side, there was a very large opportunity, as well as being a very large unmet medical need. So that was the driver for the commercial people.
Anyone else something to add?
Some opportunities you do have to create yourself. For example, one of our products is a test that detects a sexually transmitted infection called M. genitalium, and it wasn't really thought to be that big a deal when we sort of first started. But we were working with clinicians who didn't think it was a problem, and then as it turned out, not only did it cause a lot of problems, but there was a lot of resistance to antibiotics that were being used to treat it. And so until we developed a test where you could detect the antibiotic resistance, there was no market. There wasn't anything. So we work with the sort of key opinion leaders who give us our leads, but they're also the ones that are also helping drive the adoption at the other end of the process. And on the basis of that test coming up, they actually have introduced new recommended testing guidelines in Australia, New Zealand, France, Europe, and probably in the US. So that was a market where we really had to create it from scratch ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. I'd like to think that the best startups are the ones where there is that need and then you went to find a solution to meet that need. But I don't think it always happens that way. And look at the iPod, you know, it would never have been around if that's how people think. Nobody of us thought that we need an iPod, let alone an iPhone and an iPad. So I think, yeah, you're right, Alison. I think you create that, you sometimes have to create the opportunity. For our technology, our CEO saw the potential of the technology and saw that it really could have an impact on the chemical industry and didn't want it to sit on the shelf, you know, have an invention that didn't go anywhere. So then he decided to start a company and drive it. And it's been up and down throughout, finding the right way to find the unmet need or having people adopt it. Adopting new technology is a big hurdle in anything new that comes to market. So yeah, I do think that a lot of companies do start off not necessarily clearly identifying the unmet need, but you have to know where it's going to go. You have to understand the unmet need, even if the customer doesn't understand it yet. And I think that's the difference, that you can really articulate where it can be applied.
Yeah, for us, you know, we were really focused on, you know, the problems around increasing output in vaccine manufacturing and also improving animal welfare. So we did really start problem focused, but, you know, we probably went back to the lab a little bit earlier than we should have. We didn't really understand all of the nuances of the problem. In some ways we got lucky, you know, and then sort of presented our solution, and the things that we thought were great about the, you know, industry were like, yeah, that's cool too, but actually these are the reasons that this technology is actually really good, which were things that we weren't really thinking about, really process-based things. So in some ways we got lucky, but yeah, we definitely were thinking about these large looming industry problems.
Okay. Beatrix, sorry.
No, I was saying, as we are now applying our technology, we are bringing new molecules to market that utilize our technology platform. And there we are going very much into understanding the market. And I think that's different. When there's a molecule, you really do have to understand the market. We actually engage different market research companies to help us with the information. And that's probably what you did, Caitlin. You really get out there and dig, and definitely for a molecule, I think you do have to understand that and go and see what's out there, see what the competitors are doing, and we tend to do that anonymously through a market research company to not directly influence where the technology is coming from, and then we step in and get directly in front of the customers once we have a certain amount of validation and a certain amount of understanding.
Okay, you kind of lead into my question of how do you go about understanding the market and learning your customers' need and pain points. So yeah, if you have a bit more comments on that part.
Yeah, I ended up, as a result of this, creating this multi-point evaluation tool that I use for evaluating different chemicals. We're in a position that we're not looking at a one molecule thing, and we really want to drive this and socialize our technology, if you want, that this is a ready to go to technology in the chemical industry. So we're looking at lots of different molecules where we could commercialize our technology and demonstrate it. So this tool allows me to compare these side by side from a technical risk and a market risk, because everything has pluses and minuses, and then you have to make a decision as to what risk is, what's the most important for you. And as a first molecule, you probably want to minimize the technical risk as much as possible, because you really want to get that to market and get that commercial proof established. And then later on, you may want to take the ones that are a little bit higher risk, because they prove more of your technology, how far you can go. And so making those decisions along the way has been important to us.
Okay, anyone else?
Before we start to develop any product, we go through a full market technical risk, evaluate the market size, etc., etc. In terms of getting some of our market intelligence is actually picked up by our sales folks. So as we have really clever people at that end that aren't just selling to people. What they're actually doing is finding out what machines those labs are running, what kind of tests, what kind of volumes they're pushing through. So that gives us a really good idea of the landscape that we're trying to push into and where the next opportunity might come from.
Maree here. With regard to attracting venture capital to form a startup and then to get follow-on funding, if you can't articulate the unmet medical need right at the beginning, they won't give you the money to even get started. So where you can buy slices of reports, market reports that are out there, and UniQuest does that at the University of Queensland. And also speaking to key opinion leaders, it's very important to get their input as well, because they're going to influence the uptake further down the track.
For us, we were, my group in general had been doing research with the poultry industry for a while. And so we really, just mind our contacts, which sounds kind of funny, but sometimes you're just afraid to pick up the phone and call somebody, but that actually was really useful. People are often really generous with their time. And so people, that we had collaborated with in industry, those might not be those are usually some of the more technical people, but they were really happy to put us in touch with the people that actually could answer our questions and things like that. And it's a huge industry, but there's only a few main players in it. And so, yeah, that was really useful, just getting on the phone and actually talking to people. And, if you ask people what their problems are and what really frustrates them about their industry and things like that, people are often really willing to, talk about themselves and talk about what makes them angry in their job. And so, yeah, it was a really great tool to just, instead of leading them and saying like, hey, I've got this solution, just say, what are your problems, and how would you rank them? And what are the most important parts of your problems? So I think just being open to, instead of presupposing that you've got the solution, being really open to feedback from your customers.
Okay, excellent. One question I'm very interested in as well is, we're all working in SynBio, in biotech, agtech, medtech. So we all very much work on, we work on genetically engineered organism, or at least parts of genetically engineered, parts. Were there raised any ethical or safety concerns from your customers, and did that impact, and in which way, your marketing strategy? Would you flag it? Would you hide it? How did you go about it?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we're making genetically engineered chickens. There's really no hiding that. You know, some of our animals are gene edited, so knockout, and so depending on the jurisdiction that you're in, they may be considered GMO, they may not be. For our adaptive eggs line, which is our sex selection line, we're using a genetic marker, a synthetic gene that we're putting in there as a marker, and so those animals are GMO no matter what. You know, in that system, we're pulling the GMO animals out. So, you know, the females that come out of the system are not GMO, but, you know, there is GMO definitely in that breeding system. And so we really just had to take it head on and say, you know, this is part of our system. And, you know, we believe that it's safe. You know, we interface a lot with regulators. We talk to different people about it. And I think that's the thing, is people have a knee-jerk reaction against GMO, but when you tell them, you know, like, we're trying to solve a solution so that 7 billion male chickens aren't killed every single year, you know, then it becomes more of a cost benefit for analysis for people. I think a lot of people feel like, you know, what are they getting out of GMO products now? Nothing. For them, it just feels like it's all risk on their side. It, you know, perceived risk, not necessarily real risk, but perceived risk. But when you can actually present them with something that they're, you know, they care about and they can actually get behind, that's the approach we've taken, because we really just have to face it head on, because it is such a critical part of our business.
I agree. There's a lack of knowledge in consumers, I guess, about what GMO really means. And they're looking for non-GMO on a label, but really, what is that? So when you look at cosmetics, they often want non-GMO. Now, for our processes, we utilize an enzyme which is out of the cell, so it's not a living organism. But even if we did use in the cell, it's a processing aid. So it's not, there's no GMO in the final product. It is used as a reaction, a catalyst. But still, people are hesitant as to whether that's considered non-GMO or not. It is by law, but the consumer doesn't know. And that is definitely something we haven't necessarily had to address right now, but it is something that we will have to have just strong attack head on, show how it's used so people understand it. But I think in general in the world, more understanding on what GMO really means is probably would be a good thing for consumers to have.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay, then I'll move further. Yeah, looking at the time. The big next chunk of discussion will be all about commercialization pathways. And the first part, let's talk a little bit more. Let's talk a little bit more about IP. So I understand that most of you developed IP at the institution that you spun out of, or was this always the case? Or did you develop the IP in the startup?
Both. So we came with some foundation IP, and we have continued to invent. That's actually my one skill. I don't claim any others, but I'm a good inventor, and SpeeDx currently has 120 granted patents and 85 pending. So we've got a lot out there.
I think the area of IP is a minefield. It's so difficult to navigate because and it's not very well understood. So it's very tempting just to file as much IP as you want, but it's expensive and it has to be filed across the whole world. There's no point in filing something in Europe because somebody else can just go and copy it in the US. And so it is really expensive undertaking. So having I think policies in the company about trade secrets and know-how is important. So some of the things you may decide you don't want to patent, but you want to keep as a trade secret and something that is your knowledge. To avoid the cost, but also, you know, patents expire, and to avoid the copycat. And so everything that you put in a patent can be copied, in whether either in a region you haven't covered and as a small startup, can you really afford to go after all of these people who if someone has copied it And so I think thinking about the company as to what you really want to protect in a patent and what you want to keep as trade secret is important to think about. And I'm not the specialist to advise on that. I just know it is a minefield out there that really has to be considered.
Yeah, they're very good points. In the university environment, we talk about publish or perish, but there's also patent or perish. So without a patent position, the venture capital people won't give you any money to create a startup. So, and then the startup is generating extra IP as time goes on.
Yeah, I agree. There's a big push to generate IP from capital or from venture capitalists, and also within the company, and also academics are used to creating that. Right, that is something that is a legacy of academics.
So if you developed IP-free company foundation, then how did you go about accessing the IP? With your institution, did you have to negotiate? Did you get an exclusive license? Did you get it assigned? Can you talk us a little bit more about that experience?
Yeah, so UniQuest, who I mentioned before, the main commercialisation company owned by the University of Queensland. So they assigned the IP to the startup company.
Just like that?
Oh, no, it wasn't just like that. Certain milestones had to be met. And so that was, the long and the short of it is, it was eventually assigned to the company. That was important for the company, because much further down the track, when they were wanting to be purchased by a big company, it's important that they have the IP in the company that's being sold.
We also managed to get our IP out of J&J and get it assigned across into SpeeDx. It wasn't without a reasonable amount of argy-bargy. And in the end, they own a part of our company as a exchange for the IP.
For us, we're wrapping up a 1-year license negotiation that's been going on. So it's been a pretty arduous journey to get to the end. Our IP is pretty complicated because we actually are licensing multiple patent families. Some of it is the the unique technology around just engineering birds themselves. So that's a methodology, and then some of it is around our specific targets. So yeah, it's pretty complicated. We have to do a licensing strategy. We can't have the IP assigned to us because the IP, 2 of the IP patent families have multiple owners, and so we can't have things assigned. So yeah, it makes it a little bit more difficult, but that's what happens, especially when you are when you start projects from the academic side and you're like, oh, let's all collaborate, and then you've got 3 universities all together, 3 organizations all together that all co-own this IP, and it lots of cooks in the kitchen when it comes to try to negotiate a license around it.
Okay.
We have tried to collaborate with academics because we like some of the ventures they've done and bring that IP in-house, and it's not always straightforward. But it's difficult to assign a value to an IP before something is actually a commercial solution. And that's what I think in the academic world often is a temptation to say, oh, but this has a potential for like $1 billion market. Yeah, but it's not commercial, you can't do anything. And so much work has to be done before that is a commercial solution. So coming from the other side, it's very difficult to really figure out how much you should pay for a patent from the academic world and what its value is, and then you have to then pay to keep it up. So there's a huge cost of taking up the patent. So yeah, definitely there's been a lot of negotiations we're from the other side of it. So.
Okay. We touched a little bit about venture capitalists. SynBio, like all the deep tech, they're quite capital intensive and they require lots of development and research phases. How did you, and I actually know a lot of you secured a lot of funding. So can you talk us through what it did require? How did you get exposure to the investment? Did you seek grant money as well on top of the equity funding? Yeah.
Okay.
Those were amazing. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, Maree here again. So in my case, the tech transfer company of the university, UniQuest, they had the relationships in place with the VC companies. And so they organised for pitching, and the pitches comprise myself on the technology side and then a UniQuest person on the commercial side. And you know, you get the initial funding, and then there was commercial ready program was available back then, so it was possible to get, you know, $2 million from commercial ready, which is non-diluting capital. And then when you get to certain milestones, then the venture capital firms have the opportunity to put more money in. And also in the case of Spinifex, another venture firm came in and joined the original three. So as time went on, more money is required. So where there was grant funding, that was obtained, and where additional capital was needed, the original investors were asked to put more money in, and then another investment firm, venture firm, joined and they put money in. So, you know, as time goes on, you need to keep getting more money so you can get close to the point where you either have a company where the value's gone right up because you've got a successful clinical trial, and then it's people want to, you know, big firms want to acquire that startup.
So in our team, our founders were excellent at engaging local angel investors. You know, they managed to raise a significant amount of money and waited long enough before going hard at venture capital until they really had enough to prove and to make sure that the valuation was high enough when they went in and got VC money. And I think that the focusing on local angel investors was very important to our initial growth.
In our case, J&J told us that we had to find X million dollars in the middle of the GFC, or else we weren't going to be able to do what we wanted to do. Somehow we got lucky and we found some, but we have done several capital raisings since, and we've put our hand up for absolutely every grant that we can find from one end of the planet to the other, because we're all talking about deep tech. Deep tech's expensive. Deep tech takes a long time to bring to the market, so it takes money.
Yeah, for us, we're actually in the middle of our capital raise right now. We just got a $2.4 million commercialization grant from the Australian government, so that was fantastic. And right now our strategy is around targeting high net worths, and so we're working with an investment firm right now, and so really having a direct relationship with a few specific rich people, basically. It makes our, you know, we've got commercial partners that are in the poultry industry. Ag can sometimes be a pretty conservative space, and so this was definitely their preferred method of partnership for sure. And they were very picky about who was going to be sitting on the cap table. So yeah, we've been focusing on high net worths right now, but certainly eventually we're going to have to open up to further rounds, and we'll be thinking about venture capital down the line.
I think it's a really important point to make, figuring out who you want to get the money from, because ultimately they will sit on the board, they will influence your decisions. And also you can't talk to everybody. So, you know, figuring out who the best investors are, what kind of companies they invest in, making sure that your story fits their story and their ambitions, and making sure that those are aligned from the beginning. One, it'll help your conversations. If you know who you're aligned with, your pitch conversations are going to be so much easier. But also the collaborating afterwards. You know, we got a Series A investments, 6 million, led by Sofinova, and they are perfect in this space. So that is, it could have, you know, we could have ended up with people who don't understand the space as well. But Sofinova is able to help us open doors, help us strategize, and really move the company forward.
Okay. Next question then is more about scale up. The doomy word. Can you describe your scale-up process? How did you manage to get from, you know, lab scale to pilot to demonstration and then actually to commercial scale? Did you had major pivots during that process? Yeah, pretty much. Who has any comments?
Okay, I'll go. So we had lab scale material to start with. Then to get material good enough to do GLP tox and early human trials, the company in New Zealand called IRL Glycogen, they are a GMP company. So they did process development to reduce the number of synthetic steps. So then that reduces the cost of goods and makes a higher yield. And they produced the GMP quality material that was needed for the GLP tox and the phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trials. When you go from that scale up to marketing scale in therapeutic products, it's you need, you know, the big pharma type companies to do that. So that's why the startups in the space that I work in are all aiming to be bought by a very large pharmaceutical company or a very large US-based biotech. Because to get the very large scale, you have to go to those companies.
Thank you.
One of the things that's helped our journey in terms of going from startup to scale up is we're very blessed to be located at Cicada Innovation in Eveleigh, and we actually started off with a very small amount of space, and then as we grew they gave us more space and we grew again, and I'm not quite sure how much further we can stretch the friendship because we have a lot of space in Cicada these days, but we, you know, we were only licensing in the beginning. We out-licensed and worked with partners, and then our pivot was in 2014 when we decided to go it alone and have SpeeDx branded products. And yeah, now we're sort of, yeah, we're manufacturing them at Eveleigh.
Okay, any other comments? Yeah.
Yeah, so we have demonstrated our technology platform at pilot. We're not commercial yet, but we ended up using external facilities to demonstrate it, and it ended up being very, very cheap, very easy. We're producing chemicals, so there are a lot of CMO, CRO facilities for utilizing for chemical production. So that was a very easy way to demonstrate our technology at pilot without adding any capital into it. So that was good, and probably continue that. The other way that I've done this before at different companies is looking at strategic partners who can help scale up. So there's a technology partner who joined us at Renovia, and they took the technology that was invented and brought that and scaled that up to produce a pilot. And this can definitely speed it up. They put in a lot of money that we didn't have to put any capital to do that. The only thing I will say here is I think when you have partners doing it, you really have to stay connected. In CRO, it was us doing it, but with the partner, it was more handing over, and then you lose some control. Other companies may not have the same emphasis, the same direction, and the same focus as you do. All you're doing is this one chemical or this one product, while they're doing 10, 20, 100, depending on who they are. So making sure that you keep focused on your product.
Caitlin, do you have more to add?
Well, I mean, like, we're really just starting our scale up. I think because of the industry that we're in, you know, there's no pilot plant for chickens. And so, you know, one of the most critical things for us has been finding an industry partner. There's not many large chicken breeding companies in the world. And so we knew that to get our product to scale and actually have any chance of ever bringing it to market, because it is a global market, both in the vaccines and then obviously in the egg laying market, we would have to partner with one of the big two poultry breeding companies. And so securing that partnership has been really important for us. And also, you know, working with them to plan, you know, they're going to have to build new barns and new sheds and all these other things. And so that's really where we're at right now. They're planning on building that stuff in the US. So it's getting a little bit more complicated right now. But yeah, securing that partnership has been really, really critical.
Okay. I have plenty more questions about, you know, globalization and regulation, but I want to open the Q&A to the audience, and I guess we're going to touch on these topics anyways. So thanks so much for all these valuable insights. It's been really, really interesting. Now, the audience, I've seen there are already questions and I'm just about to get through them. But yeah, if you have anything, just pop it in there. Vote each other's question, makes it easier for me to pick the first ones. And yeah, so the highest voted one is from Brandon. And the question is about, oh, no, it changed. It's actually fitting really well into the globalization. So Thomas is asking, so what do you think we could all do in Australia to help promote the startup culture that other countries like the UK and the US share? Is this something at the individual level or is this a governmental level? Yeah. What do you think?
I can't answer for Australia, but what I can say is that being in California, the level of entrepreneurship there is just amazing, and everyone is thinking about startups. But what you also get is you get the skills and you get the money all in one place, and that's why I think that they thrive and so many startups come out of there. Exactly what you can do in Australia is harder for me to answer, but I definitely see the benefit of having such a focus area, and there are smaller ones in other countries as well. You know, there is a startup mentality in Sweden, in the UK, there's the East Coast in the US versus the West Coast in the US, but definitely the hubs are really, like, it's perpetual. They breed more innovation and more, and it really allows people to succeed.
Maree here. So in the academic institutions, if we want to have more entrepreneurship on coming from the staff, well, how you measure people will dictate how people behave by and large. So if people, when they're going for promotion, are measured on patents as well as publications, and if you've had your patent go into a startup company and then that's valued as well, then people will do it. So largely people are going to put the efforts in to how they get measured, because that's how they can then get promoted further up the tree.
I'm a big supporter of incubators, and that's, as I've said, I'm very, very happy to have come through Cicada. We get a lot of different help and a lot of different interaction. When the company's really young, they help you with all sorts of things like grants, and there's ongoing sort of courses that are very much towards commercialization or IP or something along those lines. They're really there to support the specifics of what it is you have to, those hurdles you have to get over in those early days to make things happen. So I'd like to see more government support for incubators.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think incubators are really good. I think that, you know, creating a community and a culture around startups is really important. I think, you know, I am American, and so I think part of the reason that there's a lot of startups in America also has to do with the cultural identity of America and the whole like pulling oneself from our bootstraps. That's a very, you know, it's very, that's what Americans want to do. It's like part of the American dream, where it's not, I don't think that's necessarily part of, you know, how Australians see themselves, which doesn't mean that Australians can't do it. They absolutely can. But I think it's a little bit less as like a prized thing to do. And so I think really creating those communities of people who really want to do that can really help foster that, because I don't think it's quite as, I guess, culturally valued in Australia.
Okay. All right, then next question is from Tom Williams. It goes to Beatrix. How do you determine if a particular chemical has an advantage through cell-free synthesis instead of the traditional cell-based bioprocessing?
It's a really good question. And obviously it's not that simple. You can't just immediately look at it and say which is going to be best. We did do a full economic analysis and done a few on comparing them, and generally, you know, our cell-free synthesis does come up ahead on capital, OPEX, in all the cases we've looked at, and just due to the amount of energy, the amount of cost required to keep the cell alive, and also the downstream processing. Like, once you include that in your economic analysis, the costs for fermentation go up a lot. But really, at the moment, it's looking at what are the obstacles in your fermentation process. And generally, it's the low titers you can't get to the production. And then you see if there is an enzymatic route that can be done instead, you know, can the enzymes that you are using in your route be taken out of the cell? So I think we would say in almost any case, we would be more economical eventually, but there are certain reactions where our technology is just not quite there yet. If it requires a lot of cofactors, things like that, we're still in the development phase of doing that. We will get there, but that's not where we are today. So it depends a little bit on the reaction and what you're trying to achieve. But generally, I think with fermentation, you get to such complex reactions that it's just so low titers, it just isn't economical anymore. We would then go back to the drawing board and is there a different route? Can we do this in a simpler way? You don't have to use the enzymes that are in your in the fermentation route, and you can use different enzymes. Is there a different starting material? So we would do a back to the drawing board and see how it could be made, and whether that would be more economical.
Okay, thank you. Next question by Luki Seminik, I'm not sure, sorry. For each of the panelists, what was the most challenging barrier to starting a company, and how did you overcome it? Who goes first? Alison.
Finding venture capital in the middle of the global financial crisis. Basically, it was a really tough time to get out there and be doing that sort of legwork. But once we sort of got started, you know, our venture capitalists are on our board. They're or the initial venture capitalists, and you know, they're sort of great and supportive, and it's been good fun actually. It's been a lot of hard work, but it has been a hell of a lot of fun.
Okay, anyone else?
Well, I didn't start the company, but I think in EnginZyme, two challenges probably spring to mind. One is figuring out what skills you have and then making sure you add the right skills when you need them. I know startup founders, they often end up doing everything, and you end up having doing things that you are not ideally suited to. Yeah, and so figuring out when you need to bring in other skills of people who've already done it, I think is a key important thing and challenge to overcome. And then for EnginZyme particularly, it was about how best to bring our technology to market. You know, the core of our technology is this immobilization carrier, and we could have just focused on selling the carrier. but then, we broadened this to less about what we had, but more about how it is used in industry. And so now the services around this carrier being able, teaching people or helping people utilize it and moving in that direction allowed us to focus much more on real commercial solutions rather than just being a supplier of this support.
Thank you. Next question is from Brandon Kidd. It's a very long message. Once the technology is funded and a company is formed, how do you choose between building up the tech for validation and create an R&D pipeline versus building a business on the existing product, seeking funding and developing customer partnership? How do you balance it? Or is it just a hassle on all fronts? Yeah.
It's a good question. I think focus. I think that is one of the downsides of a lot of startups, is doing too much. And it is definitely, from what I've seen in Silicon Valley, it's very easy to go what I call after the next shiny thing. And I think you need to have focus, you need to have priorities in the customers that we all understand, and try and live by them. But it's very hard to say no to a new opportunity and not to just follow it on. But I think if you believe in the one that you have, that you need to focus on bringing something to market. There's no point of having 10 opportunities that are all in very early lab stage. You need to make sure that you take something forward. And that may not be the perfect one, but take it forward. And but also on the flip side, I think you have to be not too hung up on your opportunities as well. You have to be able to kill the baby if you want and say, yeah, it's not going very well, let's do something else. But definitely focus. You can't just take on project after project after project.
Yeah, I agree. I think figuring out what your minimal viable product is and like what that path line is to actually get it to commercialization, especially if it's going to be a global product, what your first target market is going to be and like how to drive to get to that is really, really, really critical. And also, yeah, how to take feedback in to say like, you have to be really focused, but you also have to be attuned to what is and isn't working. And yeah, I think it'd be easy to get distracted by like, oh, this is really interesting, but you have to really focus. But at the same time, you have to, while you're building that pipeline, what are your strengths? Because, if in 5 years you achieve this, what is the next thing? So you do have to nurture those new ideas, but you have to fit them in with the strategy of what you're doing now. If the new idea is way over here and it's not, if it's not in the wheelhouse that you're building, then it's probably not the right idea to be putting in that back pipeline.
Okay. Maree, did you want to add something to this?
Yeah, sure. Basically, right at the very beginning, you need to know where the exit is, and then stay very focused on progressing the technology, adding value to get to the exit point, because that's what the venture capitalists are wanting you to achieve, is the exit for the company. So staying focused, as was already said.
Okay. Next question.
That one right, Maree.
Sorry, Alison? Oh.
Maree definitely got that one right. This was a very good exit.
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about your exit. That's true. If there's some time, I'll pick that up later. We have a question by Rebecca Walters. She's asking about, from an academic's point of view, how do you manage to get in contact with people in the industry that can help you to get started? How important were friends, existing contacts, and to what extent is the entrepreneurship a one-man-woman show? I guess.
I think it should never be a one-man show, right? It takes a team to do this and to do a startup, and it doesn't take one-man show. But also, you don't need to hire everyone in the company, and there's a balance there. We use consultants a lot, and once our name is out there, people come to us. But I guess that's harder once you're starting academic. There are so many people who have worked in the startup who want to advise on new startups. and they're out there, and you go through LinkedIn, you can find these people, contact them, and make sure there's a fit in what you are doing. But I really found that the amount of advisors, consultants out there who want to help is enormous.
Okay. Anyone else? Yeah.
I think you need to know what you're good at, stay focused on what you're good at, and add other people with the complementary skills to help you get to the exit.
I'd also say, like, talk to as many people as you can. If you go to a conference, do your networking, even if it's not your comfort zone. It's really worthwhile.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Another question, high rank from Brandon Kidd. Question to all panelists. What training would you wish that you had received as a scientist or technologist that helped you to work in a startup and continue to scale to a profitable company? Is there better business training, interpersonal skills and emotional intelligence, sales, IP? Yeah. Who wants to comment first?
I think one of the biggest things is, you know, in academia, you're writing grants, things like that. So you're trying to convince the people that have money that they should give it to you. You've got a good idea and you'll spend it. Obviously, that's a pretty critical skill for a startup as well. But I think the flip side of that is you need to actually, you know, turn that magnifying glass back on yourself, because now once you have, you know, the money in your startup, you need to really critically evaluate how exactly you're spending it, and, like, you know, are the experiments that you're doing asking the right questions and getting you the right data that you want. It can't just be it can be a little bit exploratory, but really you want to have a focus, and you really should have a good idea of what specific goal you are meeting by spending this money and doing this experiment. And I think that, you know, can be a bit of a switch, especially for more academic scientists. And I think that that's definitely something that we are not necessarily taught in academia at all. It's more about, like, trying to convince somebody to give you money, and then you do something really interesting with it, as opposed to saying, like, what is actually really critical that needs to be done. Yeah.
I think also that there's actually a real gap, and there's so many skills that are important within our business that are not taught in university. So, you know, to get a regulatory person, they're all taught in-house. They're not generally, there's not generally a lot of skills. If I was saying something to a younger self, I'd say try and get an internship if you can within industry placement. Sometimes they work out really well. We've had about 20 over the last 5 years, and several of them have got jobs, but all of them have taken away quite a lot of just insight into the difference between academia and industry. And the other option is I'm a super big fan of embedding PhD students in companies, and I've done it for my whole life. Done it at J&J, and I've done it at SpeeDx. I have PhD students. They come out and they're very well rounded. It's win-win. I can play. We have some quarantined research that isn't about product development. We can develop some new ideas, but on the other side, you know, they get a broad skill set.
So I think I'd add to that. I mean, I agree. I don't think that all of this needs to be taught at university. I mean, not everybody is going to go into running a startup, but if you are an inventor and you end up being a CEO, you need to recognize that you're probably missing some business skills, and go out and seek them. There are so many different ways of getting that. Use some coaching if you need it, find different courses, and it's all available. A lot of it is online, but I don't think it needs to be taught as part of the academic curriculum, because I don't think you can necessarily learn everything in academia either. There's a big value of just being in industry, and I think the PhD internships, I think, is a great example. We do those as well at EnginZyme, and we think that you do need to, but I do think that you need to be introspective and recognize that you don't have all the skills, and either hire those skills or figure out, if you're going to remain CEO, figure out how you can acquire those. Because ultimately, as a CEO, you need to be able to let go of the lab. And I think that's one of the difficulties of CEO people. They're quite happy to stay in the lab forever. But if that's what you want to be, then maybe you don't want to be the CEO. You have to be able to let go and focus on where the company needs to go, how to grow the company, what business point of view, where the finance is going to go, where the focus is. And this requires very different skills.
Okay.
Another skill that really needs to be taught in university is quality systems. So, you know, in a company, quality systems are very, very important so that you can be 100% confident in all the work that's generated. And I think that should be taught in university.
Okay, we have two short questions. Brief answers, please, because we're running out of time. First one is from Tom. He wants an outlook for the future. Is there any potential for a SynBio iPod type blockbuster consumer product? And tell us, what might it look like?
That's a fun question, but if I knew what that could be, I probably wouldn't be here. But I do think that if you think of iPod being very sort of socialized, then yes, I think SynBio will be a socialized solution in the future, and a solution that can easily be incorporated for production of chemicals and for other things that are just more recognized. So yes, I think it's there as a go-to solution in chemical industry, absolutely.
And one more comment from someone else. Okay, we move to the next one. Jocelyn Johns, she asked the whole panel, she's interested in the key opinion leaders. Any tips on identifying or engaging them? Is there a too soon or too late point in your tech development to tackle this?
I think key opinion leaders need to be contacted very early on, because you may think your technology is what's needed and they might give you a different opinion. So they will be very important to have their input into whether or not the technology that you've got is going to actually have the potential to do what you think it's going to do. So I think having their opinion fairly early on is quite important.
I couldn't agree more. You've got to get them in as early as possible, and they are truly invaluable to the whole process. You can't do it without them. They're very, very critical and central to the whole operation.
All right. Okay, I think that's it then. Thank you so much for this immensely insightful and interesting panel discussion. I think if we were in a room now, there would be a massive applause. We can't have it now, but we all thinking about applauding. Okay, a few more minutes to announcement. One will be from our sponsor, who's going to announce the winner of today's Q&A session.
But thank you, Caitlin, Maree, Alison and Beatrix. That was some wonderful discussion. It's really insightful to get your experience in how you've sort of progressed through your careers and opportunities that you've taken, and also providing some really good advice to probably a lot of the delegates listening tonight in how they could potentially start their careers in a commercial environment. Unfortunately, we didn't get through all the questions tonight, but I certainly think that a couple of questions posed by Brent and Kit have certainly provided the most discussion, definitely. So Decode are distributors in Australia for Twist Bioscience, and both Decode and Twist really want to support the synthetic biology market in Australia. So we will be providing Brendan a $500 voucher to order some more product through Twist. And also, just to support all of you, we've just released a promotion. So in terms of any gene fragments you need, up to 1,800 base pairs, if you buy one, we will supply your second one free of charge. So thank you very much for tonight. Thank you, Kirsten. And again, to all the panelists, it was a wonderful discussion. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Congratulations, Brendan. Okay, final announcement. Yeah, so the SBA Brisbane node is relaunching their SynBio Meetups. And first event will take place on the 23rd of September in the precinct. So there's only a limited number of people that can attend, but everyone can also zoom in at 6:30. There will be an overview given on the SynBio at QUT by Rob Spade, and then Nina Pollack will also talk about her exciting research on tissue-engineered pseudo-organism. To hear more about this event and to get on the mailing list, just follow at SBA Brisbane on Twitter or email Alex. I will share his email address in the chat. So very exciting news coming out. And yeah, this is it. Thank you so much to all our panelists, to everyone that dialed in and engaged in the Q&A. It was a very exciting event. I'm very happy. In the meantime, connect with us on Twitter, on LinkedIn. Our event has been recorded. It will be shared on the YouTube, so you can watch it again, or email us. And then we'll see you next time in our next meetup. And have a great rest of the day, and Beatrix, great day ahead. So yeah, bye everyone.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you.